Assalamu alaikum. How are you all? I hope you must be having a great time. If you remember, in the previous session, we had concentrated on the aspect of language and its properties. Today, I am going to switch my discussion to key features of language. As previously elaborated, I informed you that language may not be defined in specific terms, yet one has to admit that it can be explained with regard to its properties and features. So today I am going to enumerate its features one by one. So the very first feature of language is that language is actually a system of words and sounds. You must remember that every language, that can be any language, it comprises words, lexemes and sounds, phonemes. And on the basis of phonemes, we constitute different words. If you remember, in the previous class, I informed you and explained this concept that every phoneme is a distinct and discrete unit. When these distinct units are joined, we come up with different words, and all these words are meaningful. Although sounds are meaningless, but when you combine them with the help of certain rules and regulations of any language, peculiar, typical to any language, then you come up with different words that provide you with the concept and meaning. So that is the first feature of language. Now what's the second feature? The second feature of language is that it is a mode of communication. You must remember one thing, that it is language with the help of which a human can be differentiated from other species, plants, animals, mammals, etc. And if you have a language, you use language for only one purpose, and that is communication. If this aspect is lost, the purpose and existence of language will have no justification. So the first and foremost, rather the first and the last purpose of language is to communicate, to project, to impart your feelings, thoughts, your anger, resentment, and your love. So the purpose is communication, and that is to share, project, impart your impulses, feelings, ideas, perceptions, knowledge, and so forth. So that is an extremely important characteristic of language. If there is no communication, there is no purpose and justification for a language to sustain itself. So that is the second feature. Now let's move towards the third feature. Now the third feature of language is that it is a social phenomenon. Now, social phenomenon. What is a social phenomenon? You must remember one thing, that if you say there is a language, that language must be used in a particular social context. Social context means that whenever we use language, language is always used as a medium of interaction amongst society members. When there are people living in a community or in a speech community, all of them interact with each other, with one another, with the help of language. So if there is no language, there will be no social interaction. So the key feature of language is to interact within a society. If we are a member of a society, it means we have a language, and if we have a language, we will interact, we will conversate with each other, we will share our feelings, ideas and thoughts. That's the third feature, and the most important factor that one needs to remember is that language itself is a social phenomenon. Language is not just an isolated entity that can be analyzed along the line of its structure and organization by segmenting its different elements or components in the form of phonology, morphology, syntax, semantics, pragmatics, and then ultimately discourse. It is something that is used in a social context. So the social perspective of language must be analyzed thoroughly. That's the third feature. Now, let's move towards the fourth feature. The fourth feature of language is that language is conventional and non-instinctive. Conventional means that to learn or acquire a language, one needs to follow a particular route. When a child is growing up, he looks around, he follows the other people, his age mates, peers, colleagues, friends, fellows, and parents, especially the surroundings. So when he looks at the surrounding, he acquires a language, he learns a language. That is why we say that language is mostly culturally transmitted. So it is something that is based on certain conventions. Conventions means that language has certain rules and regulations, and anyone who wishes to acquire / or learn a language, he or she needs to follow these rules and regulations. It means he has to follow certain conventions, and those conventions would be practiced in a particular social context. Non-instinctive means that it is not something inherited genetically. Over here, I would like to draw a comparison between animal communication system and human language. So human language is purely based on conventions, as opposed to animals' communication system that is purely instinctive, because wherever an animal is, in which context he or she is, it will follow that same inherited knowledge that animal has. So you must remember one thing, that animal communication system is completely different from humans' language. That's the fourth feature. Let's move towards the fifth. We mostly say that language is a flexible entity. It's an object of inquiry where you can modify, extend, coin, subtract, add, do whatever you like according to the newly introduced trends. For example, if I give you an example, first I would write the meaning. Extendable, modifiable. It means with the passage of time, we introduce new vocabulary items. Some are borrowed from other languages. Some new structures are developed so that new trends, new inquiries and discoveries are incorporated. So language itself is inclusive in a way that it welcomes the other structures, vocabulary into its fold so that it can be adapted and adjusted to new environments and situations. If you remember, Latin language was the language of scholarship. It was the language of highly educated people. It was the language of universities. It was the language of the courts. But today, Latin is a dead language. Why it is a dead language? The reason is that it was not flexible. It was not inviting other structure to its fray, to its fold. And that's the reason we often say that language is dynamic. The moment language gets static, it's a dead language in the long run. So you must remember that language is a dynamic, flexible phenomenon. That is why it is modified, molded, shaped, and then even extended onto other levels so that other structures and other trends are included. So that's the fifth feature. Let's move towards the next feature. That's true. Language is something where structures are complex. The structures are not easily comprehended, and that's the reality. And that's also the essence and beauty of language. If you look at this sixth feature, over here I have to qualify this term. Structurally complex means that there are certain structures that apparently creates confusion. I would write an example. Now I have written two examples. One is a phrase, another one is a sentence. My aim and objective in writing these two examples is to qualify and explain this structurally complex feature of language. Now, how is it complex? If you look at the first example, old men and women, over here one can apply two interpretations. One interpretation is either old men and women. One interpretation. The second interpretation can be old men and old women. So these are two meanings that one can extract and deduce from the apparent surface structure. Either old men and women or old men and old women. That's one confusion. The second example, I hit a man with a stick. I hit a man with a stick. Now over here again the sentence is structurally complex. Why? There are two meanings that can be associated with this structure. One can be I hit a man with a stick. The second would be I hit a man who was holding a stick. So these are two meanings, double meanings, two interpretations. Why there are two interpretations? Because the structure itself is ambiguous. So sometimes there are certain anomalies. certain peculiarities associated with the structures of language which create confusions in the minds of the reader, in the minds of the learners. So all these features need to be kept in mind and accounted for while learning a language. So these were the prominent key features of language. So today I will wind up my lecture with the key features of language. In the next session we'll move towards the next topic. I hope you must have enjoyed this lecture. So catch you in the next lecture and do subscribe my channel. Thank you very much for your time. God bless you.